I've always wanted to learn how to do these flowing wire animations. Now, I've done them before by animating the stroke-offset property, but in this one we can see that the line is actually fading at the end. Animating by the stroke-offset property will give you a product kind of like what we see on the Google Gemini website, where the start and the end of the line are both very defined and there's no sort of fade out effect. I saw this tweet by John Famous the other day though, and had this animation where the lines are definitely fading out at the end. So we can see here that it's flowing from these little cards, and then there's this kind of fade out opacity effect, and then there's another animation happening over here. He gives us some short details about how he made this animation, saying he has one gray layer, and then on top of that, one colored layer, and then he also says the color layer has a linear gradient mask, and keyframes translate the mask by animating the mask position X. So not a ton of detail there. Let's hop into it and see how to actually build it in this way.
Hey there, WebBay.
We'll get started by building our wires here in Figma. I'm going to grab the frame tool and I'm just going to grab the desktop frame. And so I have that over here now. And I'm just going to use this to help me size my images. And then I'll go ahead and give it a little bit of fill so I can see what's going on. So I'm going to grab the pen tool and I'm just going to draw a line from up here to down here, kind of edge to edge. And then I'll hold Command to get the bend tool. And that can help me bend the line. And I'm going to hold Shift actually to make it straight as well. So something like that. And then on this one here, something like that. So that'll be my first point. And then I'm going to click done. So you want to get out of the pen tool and then go back in because we want 3 different paths for this SVG. If we stayed in here and drew another path, then we would actually just get all one big path. So let's go ahead and click done, and we'll click our pen tool again. And I'm just going to create another line, nothing too fancy here. And we will hold Control and Shift again and just make something kind of similar at these points. And I'm going to click done again, and then we'll do one last line, and we'll do it something. I will invert it the other way, something like this, and holding Control and Shift to get that going. Now let's go ahead and just make sure that these are all kind of snapping to the edges. So I'm just dragging each line right to where it needs to go at the edge of the frame there. And it's snapping because for some reason the pen tool doesn't snap too well. So that's just a Figma thing. I guess you could also build these in Illustrator, of course. And then actually I want to zoom in here and just kind of close in these to get them a little closer. So I think that's pretty good. Now all I'm going to do is select all 3 by holding Shift. And I'm going to change this to be some sort of gray, something like D5 I like. And we'll change the width or the stroke width to be 4. So let's go ahead and select all 3 again. So I've got all 3 and I'm just going to go ahead and frame this now. So we frame the selection and we can drag it out of our original frame. And I like doing this because we get a specific width of 1440 and a height of 396. This is going to come into play of how we set our ratio for making this responsive on all breakpoints. Now we've got this whole thing selected. Let's go ahead and right click and click copy paste as SVG. All right, now we're in Webflow. I have a layout div that takes up 100 viewport heights and it's just flex centering. So I'm going to go ahead and drop in a div and we'll call this wire wrap, just something like that. And this is going to have position set to relative because we're going to have 2 of the same wire layers on top of each other. So we're going to set both of those to position absolute within this relative frame. Now let's go ahead and drop in our first embed. So I've got that embed and I'm just going to paste our SVG code and I'm going to change the width to 100% and remove the height box so that this is now responsive. And I think everything else is good for now. We're just going to head and save and close and we can see we have our SVG right in here. And with our wire wrap div selected again, let's drop in one more embed. This is going to be the colored version. So same thing, width 100%, delete the height here. And let's change the stroke colors to yellow for this first one, blue for the second one, and red for the third one. And we're going to save and close that. And we can see we have both of these on top of each other. Let's go ahead and we'll make this position absolute. So that's going to look really bad. And this one is also going to be position absolute. Actually, let's set to cover for each of them, just like so. And so these are covering now. And I'm going to select this first one, which is our back wires embed, just like that. And the second one, and this will get called front wires embed, just like that. Now we're going to write a little bit of SVG code within our front embed wires to get our linear gradient mask going. So let's go ahead and open that and give us some room right here. So let's start by defining some defs tags. This stands for definitions. And within the definitions, we're going to define a linear gradient. So SVG has its own linear gradient tag and we give it an ID of gradient here. Just a comment here to remind us on a mask that white shows and black hides, we also have opacity to work with, which we're going to use here. So our very first gradient stop is going to be at the 0 offset, or meaning the beginning of this gradient. And then we're going to set the stop color to be white so that it shows, and the opacity is 0 so that it actually doesn't show. So you could use black here or whatever, but I'm going to be using the color white throughout the whole thing and modifying opacity to hide and show content. Next, we'll set another stop at 0.8 of an offset. So this means 80% of whatever your linear gradient element is, and the stop color is going to be white with a full opacity of 1. And we're going to find one more stop right at that same 80% with a stop color of white, setting the opacity to 0. This is going to give that really abrupt stop. So we see we have a fade between 0 and 80%, and then at 80%, we have a complete abrupt change from totally visible to totally hidden. Within our definitions, we can also define a mask, and we'll set this to an ID of gradient mask, and then we'll pass a rect element. Now this has a class mask rect, and it also has an X and Y value. And we could start by saying it's 0, but I'm going to show you what negative 50% is. The width is 100% of the parent, and the height is 100% of the parent. So just imagine that we have a gradient that goes from opacity 0 color of white to 80% to full opacity color of white, and then it just stops. And that gradient is filling this rect element because we have this fill attribute, and it's getting a URL of the gradient ID item, which is right up here. Now the last thing we need to do is we need to set the mask on each path. So we can say here mask equals open close quotes URL, and then pass the ID of our gradient mask. So gradient mask, just like that. And I'm just gonna go ahead and take this string and copy it, and we'll paste it for the second path and the third path. And now if we save and I bring this over, we can see that we have these lines abruptly stopping right here, our colors, and we can see our gray wires underneath. Now let's go ahead and change this X value to 0. And if we save it, we can see, now I'm just gonna cancel out of this. We can see at 80% of the whole width of this block, we're getting that abrupt stop that we talked about. And then the color is slowly fading into the gray because of the rest of the linear gradient that we defined. Now, the last thing that we need to do is to animate this X attribute from negative 100% to 100% so that the linear gradient pushes all the way through our scene. Now, you could link this to Webflow variables if you wanted to and actually define the animation within the interactions tab, but I think the CSS animation here is pretty trivial that we can just pop the code in up at the top. So I'm going to open up some style tags so that we're writing CSS now. And now I'm going to define a keyframes animation called slide mask. And then we have open close curly boys. And I'm going to define a from to keyframes here. And we're going to animate X from negative 100% and to 100%, just like we said, right? And next we'll target the class of mask rect. Remember, we applied that down here within the rect element. We're going to set the animation property on this to be the slide mask that we defined right above here. And we can set it to 5 seconds. I think something shorter, like 3 seconds would be great. And we can set our easing here, and infinite just means that it repeats over and over. So let's go ahead and save and close. And now we can see we have this animation happening right in the Webflow designer. Now to insert the boxes, we can just drop div elements into the wire wrap. And I already have this class called box, which just makes a square for us with some rounded corners and position absolute. And then we can just use position absolute, since the wire wrap is relative, to position these how we want. So I'm just using the top % here for the top box. And then let's go ahead and copy this box, and we'll call this is middle, just like so. And this is going to be something like down here. And then we'll copy the box again, and this will be is bottom. And we'll go ahead and push that to the bottom left and pull it down with our positioning right here. And let's make one more copy of our box. This is this one right here, and we'll call this is right combo class. And that we're going to drag over here to the top right and then just push it down with percentage. If you like this video, be sure to check out my Patreon. Thank you so much to Patrick, NB3 the best, and Chinmay, who recently signed up. Now you can actually join for free right now if you wanted to, and that gives you access to, in the collections, this total roadmap to learn Webflow. So a lot of great courses and content that I think will help you learn Webflow as fast as possible. And then also I'm releasing to my premium members this JavaScript course. This shows you how to go beyond what Webflow is capable of natively by using JavaScript to build little apps. We have a to-do list in here. We have a stopwatch and more. I'm releasing content for this every week. So be sure to check it out if you want to take your development skills to the next level. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.